let me just talk a little bit about our mission. So our mission is to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. And what does that mean? That means that Google would basically understand everything in the world, and it would understand exactly what you wanted and give you the right thing. And you know, we don't quite do this yet. So the good news is that we're not running out of things to do anytime soon. And this makes it for a very interesting environment in terms of innovation and technical work, and also in terms of building, you know, building against competition. You know, we think search can get a lot better than it is now, and we're working hard on making it better. So finally, we really try to do things that matter to everyone. So, you know, our goal is to serve everyone in the world and to do something that really matters to them. And I think that's largely why we've been successful so far. I would say the mission I laid out for you will take us a little while, since it's AI complete. I don't know if you guys know what that means. It means it's artificial intelligence. If you had a search engine that really understood...
But can't we just answer the question, never?
Well,
I mean, Google will always be a search engine, because search engines will come to define the mission that we describe, right?
Well, okay, so if you solve search, that means you can answer any question, which means you can do basically anything. So if we solve the problem I outlined, then we're doing everything, right?
It depends on whether it's a partnership or a sales deal. Real partnerships are win-win deals, and it's important when you do such a deal that you be willing to let your partner win. You know, you have to make them successful. If it's a sales deal, then you have a number of other objectives, which are to maximize your revenue capture and increase the likelihood of renewal and so forth. In the case of both Yahoo and now AOL, our intention when those deals were done was to grow their traffic and their customer satisfaction. In the case of Yahoo, if you look, there's no question that the Yahoo site traffic went up as a result of doing a deal with us. And in fact, we went back. We have about 120 web search partners, and it's pretty much predictable that for a relatively small site, their traffic can go up by a factor of 10, because the presence of the Google search, in conjunction with the value they add, brings value to them. And that's why we're able to get those deals. It's very arrogant to sit around and say, hey, we're really strong and we'll just take their money. Because in my experience, the people in the other companies are really smart too. And they're sitting around the same table saying, how do we maximize our shareholder value? That's what they're paid to do. So you have to come up with win-win deals. And if you can't, then you're wasting your time. I always like to tell people, if you're just using me in order to get a lower price from the other person, I'll just give you a bid and then don't waste my time. Right? But if you're serious, then let's construct a real partnership. It's perfectly okay to use me as a battering ram for some other reason. But my time is the thing that's most valuable, because there's only so many of these that I can construct. It takes a lot of engineering time as well.
That's true. I'm interested in languages because most people don't speak all of them. And there's a lot of information that's not in your language. Especially, I guess, right now, most of it is still in English, but that's not going to be true for much longer. So we're kind of, I mean, people who speak English, you know, are kind of lucky in that way. There's a lot of people who speak more obscure languages that have a serious issue. So we've been pretty interested in translation, and especially translation applied to searching, and making that work well. I think there's still a long ways to go to make those things really work well. Automated translation, you kind of get the ideas of things, but it's not perfect by any means, just like search. It's a very hard problem.
Sued. That's a legal challenge. Is that what you were referring to, or something else?
Could you elaborate a bit about that?
We're not guilty. Right?
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, good. The jury has ruled.
Actually, I was going to say one of the interesting things that's come up recently is there's been a debate about Scientology.
I'm much more concerned about us being sued, Larry.
Well, it's the interesting legal issue, which is that It's about freedom of information, basically.
Yes, well, I'm interested in freedom of operation here. Okay, hang on. I'll answer my question, and you can answer your question. We're obviously having fun here. There are actually two significant areas of legal issue. The first is that we brought out a dynamic pricing product, which we invented on our own, and we've been sued for patent infringement by Overture. We have hired lots of attorneys who all believe that their suit is completely without merit, and I do as well, and therefore it is. And we'll fight it to the death and all those good things. And it takes years. There's this very interesting thing called the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It was passed in 1998, I believe. And it was passed under a lot of pressure from the recording industry, and it has an awful lot of very strange components. One of the most relevant for Google is that there is a safe harbor that goes as follows. If you're an internet provider and there's information on your site that someone believes is a violation of copyright, if they complain and you remove that information, you yourself cannot be sued by the the alleged copyright owner. There is furthermore a mechanism whereby if you are then counter-notified, roughly, I'm summarizing now, in the counter-notification, you can then put the information back on and let the court decide. And again, you maintain your legal neutrality. I'm doing a bad job of summarizing it, but you get the idea. So in our particular case, do you want to take the story from there?
Yeah, so the Scientologists who are very interested in these kinds of things got very excited about an anti-Scientology site, and they requested it be removed. And we removed it. And there are various issues about how we removed it and what we removed. But basically, people were unhappy that this information was removed, which is kind of reasonable. And we actually were able to come to a really interesting solution, which was to actually link to the request, the removal request. If there are search results where something has been removed, now we link to the request that generated the removal of those results. And it turns out that actually there's law schools have agreed to have a site called chillingeffects.org.
Yeah, and it's actually Stanford and Berkeley and a number of other groups actually run this website to try to get this information out. So if you come across a DMCA-related link removal, you can go look at the complaint. And one of the most interesting things about the complaint is guess what's in the complaint?
Possibly the URLs that were removed.
We didn't tell you that, did we?
No.
Okay. Thing is that you have to be capable of doing the job and doing it well. You also need to be capable of thinking outside the box. But an equally important thing is that you have to be able to work within the culture. We've had numerous candidates who have been in the really, really smart and really, really arrogant side, who were clearly people we didn't want to spend a lot of time with because they were just too hard to deal with. And I would say, looking at the way Larry selects for everything I just described, including this culture fit, and he's also looking for people who can think very creatively.
I think other things probably we look at are, is communication skills, even for engineers, which is not always a trait people check for. We like to have some cultural diversity, even in engineering. And so we do go out of our way to recruit people who are a little bit different. I think the airport test is pretty important, which is that, just think about whether if you got stuck in an airport with this person on a long layover on a business trip, would you be happy or sad about it?
It turns out that, as best I can tell, the reason that Larry and Sergey hired Wayne, my compatriot from Sun, was that he happens to be a world-class astrophysicist. The fact that he might be a good VP of engineering may or may not have been important. But sometimes people...
It was.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Good. It was not clear to me at the time. What was interesting was that hiring people who are exceptional at something is usually a pretty good predictor of their being exceptional at everything. I don't know about you all's view, but my experience is people who are great at sports or great at speaking or great at lobbying or great at advocacy are pretty high-performing people. And those are the kind of people who have broader interests and have a bigger impact, and you tend to select for them. And that should apply. And I think Larry's point is that applies even to the people who sit in their cube and don't come out except on Sundays.
We've generally invested more in technology for how to target the ads well. It turns out targeting ads well is like targeting results well. It's not always clear which ad you should be running and how to target it and which people will be interested in it. And so a lot of the same technology for searching apply to the advertisements, and that tends to help us with our advertiser value.
We have a much higher click-through rate than the industry averages for the reasons that Larry described. And our customers have proprietary metrics that they use for what they call conversion, where they convert an advertiser to a purchaser. And the reason we get such high renewals is that the customer's proprietary metric, we are above the bar. They often don't even tell us what the metric is because it's such a trade secret within their business, they don't want anyone else to know.
That's usually how much they sell.
But at some level, unlike, for example, brand advertising, our business is highly, highly measurable. We know exactly if you spend X dollars on ads, you'll generate Y dollars in revenue per industry, per customer. Well, with respect to our search, we support 74 languages, including an awful lot of Asian languages that I had never heard of, which hopefully won't be at war with one another, kind of a thing. We have pretty much full 16-bit, basically double-byte character support. We have tremendous growth in Japan, and the majority of the Japanese portals and online services now use Google, so that's a great story. We do all of our actual data centers are all in the United States, so we serve the answers from the United States from a common set of information. Our traffic is now on the order of 60% outside the United States, so we're very, very international, and I suspect that that number will grow.
I think when we were here at Stanford, I don't know, if you guys have been here for a while, maybe you saw this happen. We did various things that were not great, like we caused the whole Stanford network to go down. For some significant amount of time, nobody could log into any computers at Stanford because we were crawling the web, and we accidentally crawled a machine at Stanford too fast that served DNS for the whole campus, and so and things like that were a big issue for Stanford, and it wasn't at all clear like we were going to be able to get through those things. And actually it was no easy task to download the web and get it onto a couple of computers and process it. And we had actually strange people from Singapore who called the University Risks Management Office, and I mean just all sorts of things happen when you try to sort of touch every computer on the internet. And so at those times I was really worried that some external factor would come in and we wouldn't be able to get around it. It's tremendously important for people to have access to information, and that's a big part of what's driven us as a company, is making sure everyone in the world has great access to information. So that's important for democracy, it's important for scientific work. It's a really important thing. I think we're pretty aggressive about pursuing that. I don't think there's been any significant roadblocks really we've had in that sense that we've been seriously concerned about. There have been issues with countries turning us off from time to time because of issues with censorship, basically. And if that were a serious issue, we'd be really concerned about it, but it hasn't been a serious issue recently.
My guess is that Google will become a more and more central legal focus around these thorny issues of global copyright and global naming and global ownership, and places which today there's no place to fight over, and somehow Google will end up as a party to that, not necessarily an intended party. We also benefit from the deployment of broadband. If you look at our traffic, Google is somewhat addictive in the sense that the quicker the site and the quicker you get the information, the more you're on it and so forth. So I think we benefit from both the liberalization of access to information, which is Larry's point, and the deployment of broadband throughout the world. And we will eventually hit some limit, but we're not anywhere near it now.
Seen one. Yeah, we definitely worry about that. So I think that it's a little bit different. I will say that when we started Google, we did it out of desperation. We actually tried to license Google to other search companies. We talked to them. We wanted to finish our PhDs. And, none of them were interested. They said, oh, we're going to go be portals. We don't care about search. And so it was a very different environment. And one reason we started the company was because we couldn't find anyone to give the technology to, and nobody else was going to do it. And it sounds kind of strange, but that was really the case at the time. I think it's a different environment where you have someone who's strong and focused on the problem, right? So I do think that's harder. I also think that if you compared Google to when we started to when we are now, I'll just give you one example. We had 30 million documents, which was competitive at the time, and today we index over 3 billion documents. And so the technology required to do that is more, it's more difficult. We put a lot of effort into that. So I think the barrier to entry is going up, but we definitely will. If you know things or whatever, you should let me know.
More seriously, when I went into Novell, Novell had a lot of operational problems and was frankly nearing bankruptcy. And we had to do a hardcore turnaround. When I came into Google, it was very different. It was clear that the culture and the structure and the things that we're talking about now were going to work, although I was quite surprised how well it has worked. So I didn't foresee our success over the last year, for which I'm eternally grateful. So my whole strategy was to provide some structure. So the first thing is we had to have an offsite. Right? So we had one, which Larry actually went to.
Yeah.
And he complained at the time about this offsite, but he since has changed his mind and said it was okay. And we worked on our strategy. So that was an example. We have a staff meeting. We have quarterly objectives, and we review them. Things like that. We had an MIS, a financial system that didn't work, and so we had to replace it. So that took 6 months. We didn't really have a financial or controller system. We had to hire those. So what I found was a company that was working extremely well but just needed a little bit of list making and structure, and that's frankly what I've been relegated to.
No, that's not true.
It's okay. It's okay. Your strategy is pretty good. It's working well so far. Extraordinary to me about Google is not that question sort of doesn't even make sense, because the problem with Google is there's too much creativity. Right? Because there's more ideas floating around the hallway than there's time and resources and so forth. So I view the problem in the company as sifting through the ideas, and partly it's because we're able to hire people who have either been at Stanford or other places who really are the world's leaders in these areas, and they're just itching to solve the problem. Part of my view of Larry and Sergey and their opportunity was that 15 or 20 years ago, the people who were doing what Larry and Sergey did were sitting at Stanford, and their data set was 1,000 documents. So they couldn't do the kinds of algorithms and analysis and complicated computer science on them because we were all busy building operating systems. So what Google has done is it's created a platform for this next generation, one level higher of algorithmic thinkers to solve problems, spelling, language detection, the kinds of things that we've talked about, which are really extraordinary at Google.
We should say too that we keep a database where anyone can add an idea, and so a couple get added every week, and there's maybe several hundred in there at this point. And actually, I forced people to do a top 100 prioritization,
which was, by the way, like pulling teeth.
Yeah, it was very difficult.
It took 3 months to actually figure out what we were doing, and then after we announced it, people said, "Oh, that's not quite right. There's all this other stuff too."